Today I'm going to be doing a colored pencil demonstration of this pelican on black paper. All of the colored pencils and other supplies that I'm using for this video are linked below in the video description. I'm using a lot of different pencils here, and I'll talk more about that in the video. If you are supporters over on Patreon, make sure to head over. This is broken down into a two-part video, 3 hours total, so you can check that out if you want to see this in a slower time. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, for as little as $4 a month, I upload a new 1 to 2 hour, sometimes 3 hour long video every single week. You also get instant access to over 150 of my longer videos that are already available now. If you want to see what videos and tutorials I already have available on Patreon, I have a video library linked below in the video description. While there, you also get access to my free 2 hour long Margay colored pencil video, so you can get a bit of a taste of what Patreon is actually like. All those links are in the video description. For this one, I am working on the Canson Conservation Board. This is a black matte board, and it's really nice because I don't have to tape it to anything. It's pretty thick. So I'm working with a combination of my Faber-Castell Polychromos and my Luminance. I used a few of the Derwent Lightfast, I believe, at one point in this. But the combination of the Luminance and then the Polychromos was great because the Polychromos are going to be a bit more transparent. So for what almost looks like a glaze, and for fine detail, the Polychromos is great. And then where I need it to be more opaque, where I really am covering the black of the paper, then I'm switching over to the Luminance. That's pretty much on this piece when I decide to use which color. And you want to keep in mind, whenever you work on black paper, it's never going to be quite as bright. Like the orange that I'm doing here, there is no way that that orange will ever be quite as bright as what it would be if I worked on white paper and then just drew in or colored in my background black. So you do want to keep that in mind. If you want to have more control of your colors, work on white paper. This gives you a very unique look though when you are working on the black paper. And you have to watch too, because I think when you photograph anything that you've done on black paper, the camera wants to adjust for the fact that it's a little bit more dull and tends to brighten it up. So a lot of times when you see someone having or post a piece online where they've worked on black paper, it'll look super bright, and then you go and see it in person, and it's like, wow, that is really dull in comparison. I try to do enough with Photoshop and Lightroom to make it look as much as possible like it does in person, but you do want to keep that in mind when working on black paper. It's not something that I would want to do every piece on, but it is really fun sometimes, and you do get that very unique look when working on a dark colored paper like this. And you can get this in lots and lots of colors. I got mine from Dick Blick. No, this is not a sponsored video, but I got mine from Dick Blick. They have tons of colors of this conservation board, so I definitely think I'm going to be investing in some more. This one is a 16 by 20. And the nice thing is with colored pencil, you know it's a very slow medium. But because I'm leaving the background just the color of that board, I'm not having to fill all of that in. So I'm able to work large without taking too long to get this done. So going back through, filling in the beak, and most of what you saw just now was a part of the live stream, so you can watch that in real time. You can see when I do my first layers, you can still see the black of the paper. It's going to take several layers before I cover that in and get it nice and smooth so it doesn't have that grainy, gritty look. And I'm using a combination of oranges, yellows, and a lot of reds to shade in the beak. You don't want to look at something and go, okay, the beak is orange, just shade it in solid orange. It's going to look very flat and very much like a cartoon. Look at all the other colors that are in there. There's even some dark browns. They're really dark reds too, especially like the line in between the top and bottom portion of the beak. You've got a lot of colors in there. Those are the things that you want to pay attention to as you're working on something when you're trying to make it look very realistic. And the same thing when I get into the feathers. You would look at them and go, okay, white, just draw it in white, but it would come out very flat. Pay attention to not just, as I'm doing here, the clumps and clusters of feathers, how they group together, but the colors, the shades, the shadows in there. Most of what I'm laying in initially, I'm not starting with my white pencil. I'm using different gray pencils. They look like they're white up against the black, but they're actually grays. I'm going to save white for my brightest highlights. If I start with white, I can't go brighter than that. So it works out much better for me to start with a more mid-tone with a lot of the grays and then work brighter or darker from there. Pulling some of the reddish tone in there. See, look at all the shadows. And the fun thing with working on black, one of the looks that I've done before that I thought was really fun is just using a white colored pencil, but getting this almost chalkboard well, some of you kids are probably way too young to remember this, but for those of us who remember blackboards, and with the white chalk from school when we were kids, you can get that look working with a white colored pencil on black paper and get some really interesting effects. Wow, words are hard. So I'm blending that out with odorless mineral spirits. Anytime you see me using that paintbrush, it is odorless mineral spirits. I'm often asked, can I just blend my colored pencils with water? No. The colored pencils are wax or oil based. Well, a combination of both, really. Water's not going to do anything with that. You're going to, in this case, I'm just using my odorless mineral spirits. This one is Gamsol. Sometimes I use Gamsol, sometimes I use Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner. It's one or the other. Now, you saw me using the Derwent Drawing Chinese White, and I'm actually going to use a lot of the Derwent Drawing pencils. If you do not have that set, I strongly recommend picking it up. It's a small set. There's only 24, I think it's 24 colors in the set. They're very neutral tones, but that's the pencil you see me using there. It's thicker, but it is super opaque, and especially when working on dark colors like this, it's great, but it blends really well. It's a very soft pencil. I'd say even softer than Prismacolor. So you don't want to sharpen it to a fine point, because the softer the lead, the more it's going to break. So I sharpen it to kind of a much smaller point. You don't want that to be long, but oh my gosh, it's super opaque and so soft, and it blends so beautifully. Unfortunately, that set only has the very neutral tones. So that wouldn't be the only set you would need for colored pencils, but it's really nice in addition to your other pencils. Now, when I work in colored pencil, I like to work in one small section at a time and just work my way around, and that's what you see me doing there. So I had mostly finished the head. I started the wing. I blended a little on that. Now I needed to let it dry. While it dried, I went back and did some detail work on the head. Now, when you do use odorless mineral spirits, make sure that it dries in between layers. You don't want to blend anything out and then go straight onto it with the pencil, because it won't stick that well, but even if you get it to stick, it's going to damage the tooth of the paper. One of the things that we're always working on with colored pencils is maintaining the integrity of the paper. You do not want to damage it. Once you damage that paper, there's nothing you can do to fix it. And even if you can't visually see that you damaged it, the pencils won't stick to it very well later on if you did damage it. So don't work your pencil onto a wet area. You can really see there with that Derwent Drawing pencil how much, that one's a gray, but look how much that stands out. So you can get really high contrast with that. And those pencils aren't great for tiny detail because it's a very, very thick lead, but when I want to get that base layer in there, or if I'm doing, let's say, a background where I've got a lot to fill in, those are really good for that too. Just building up, blocking in where the feathers go. And the feathers, when you're getting into those base layers, don't worry about anything being perfect. Get everything approximate. You know, with the feathers, I'm not sitting there counting 15 feathers going this direction, then 14 going this direction. I just need to capture the general feel, the general movement of those feathers. So I may only have half the feathers that are in my reference photo, but it's close. It looks very similar. I always think of it almost like a faux finish, where it's, you're faux finishing and making a marble look. It's not really marble. It's not super precise, but when you look at it, it looks like marble. And that's what I'm going for here as I'm working with these feathers. You really want to watch the direction that the feathers go, and also watch that you're not doing a bunch of straight lines. This goes for the head as well. Almost every single pencil stroke that I'm making is at least slightly curved. It's easy to get a very stiff look where you're just making straight lines over and over again, and that's not going to come out looking very realistic. Almost every single line here is at least slightly curved. And as I come through, I've built up each clump and cluster of the feathers, but I'm coming through with some of the darker pencils, and I keep going back in between them to shade them. After I blend, here's another thing. When you blend on black paper, when you blend out with the odorless mineral spirits, it's going to make the color, like you see right there, it looks way darker. Don't panic. Once that dries, it's going to lighten back up. But when those pencils are wet from the OMS, they look very translucent. It's letting the black of the paper show through. It's not that that doesn't happen on white paper. It's just with white paper, the white of the paper is showing through, so it's not so obvious. But you can see as that dries up, how it comes back to being opaque. Sometimes I actually found that to be a little bit annoying because I would blend it with OMS and realize when it was darker, it looked better. And so I had to keep going back through and darkening things up. So I'm going to let that area dry completely, and I'm working on the next section of feathers. Now for the bigger feathers, I try to get those pretty close to the reference photo. I don't need them to be exact, but they are more exact than when I've got a whole bunch of little feathers like I did on the chest. Now, I'm working on a kind of large section here. If you are getting intimidated by that when you're working, or you're feeling like this is too much detail, I can't keep track of where I am, break it down one single feather at a time. Make it way easier on yourself. Don't feel like you need to work on a huge section all at once. One of the things that I used to do for my students is take a piece of paper, well, really 2 pieces of paper, and on each one cut out 1 or 2 square inches and just in the middle of the paper, and then have them put one of those pieces of paper on their artwork and one on the reference photo. This is the only area you're going to focus on right now until it's finished. And that can be a way, if you find yourself getting overwhelmed by too many details, that can be a way to really help you focus on one little area at a time. The other thing is it gives you kind of a goal. So you're not looking at a piece going, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. If you sit down one night, you can just tell yourself, I'm only going to do this 1 or 2 square inches. That is my goal. Once I finish it, I will feel like I've accomplished something. So it's a really good way to go for anybody who feels overwhelmed by details, but you still want to create detailed work. Layering in again those base layers that I'll put the feathers on top of. And I really liked the texture of this paper. The pencils stuck to it so well. They blended out really smooth, but they also stuck to it really well. I'm definitely going to be trying some different Canson papers. I like the board, I think, the best, just because it's nice to have something you don't have to worry about it wrinkling or getting a crease or anything like that. But I think I'm going to try some more of the Canson papers that I used them years ago, but it's been a long time, so I need to look into some different ones because I loved working on this texture. And I know the regular Canson Mi-teintes, I've also really liked that too. It's just a nice texture to work on, and with that, if you use the Canson Mi-teintes with colored pencil, I recommend working on the smooth side, so it's like the back of the paper, but that side works really well with colored pencils. The front that's got more tooth to it would be too rough. It, for me, isn't going to give the look that I like. Now, I wanted him to have way more color than my reference photo did, so I'm pulling a lot of purples and pinks in there. And I'll put the white right on top of this. Now, one of the things, if you are working on black paper, that you can do to make your colors even brighter is get a base layer of white first, and then put your color on top of that. That will help to brighten up. So like, let's say I wanted the beak to be even more orange. I could have put white down first. Now you have to be careful because the colors, the orange will mix into that to an extent, so I'll end up with more peaches. But that is something that you can do to make things lighter than they were. You just always have to remember with colored pencil, one layer will blend in to the previous layer. So it's something that you can play with. I would recommend getting a scratch piece of paper and test out how different colors react to each other when you layer them before you try that on your actual project. So starting to separate these feathers here. Lots and lots of layers. And this paper did take a lot of layers, so that was nice. Now this is another stage. I don't need these to be perfect. I just need them to be close. I will come back through and refine this more later. I'm just blocking in my general where each of these feathers is going to go. And blending that out. And now I need to let that dry completely, and then I can come back and start putting my white pencil on top. And this is where I really liked using the polychromos for tinting the color, because I can still see what's under it. The polychromos is a bit more translucent, so it gave me this really nice effect where I was able to tint the color. And dried that, and now again coming back through, refining things a bit better. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth until it looks how I want it to. And there are going to be, when you work like this, there will be some layers that look absolutely terrible. You'll have some layers that look worse than the previous layer. That is totally okay. That just means you're not finished yet. Don't panic. Don't feel like you've ruined anything or you're not doing a good job. Keep working on it until it looks how you want it to. And that's one of the things that's so important about using a light hand. Don't push really hard with your pencils until you get to the last layers, because you want to be able to create more layers. So when you have a bad layer, you have a layer that's just an in-between layer, not even necessarily a bad layer, just doesn't quite look good yet. You want to be able to layer on top of that. And if you've pushed really hard with your colored pencils, you're not going to be able to get many additional layers on top of that. You do what we call burnishing. And to burnish, you push hard with the pencil, you end up flattening the tooth of the paper. You're jamming that pencil into all of the little nooks and crannies of that paper, and it just makes it so you can't get additional layers. It gives a nice look if it's your final layer. You just don't want to do that on a layer that you know you're going to want more on top of it, because the pencil just won't stick very well on top of an area you've pushed hard or you've burnished with. So if you want to be able to do a lot of layers, keep a sharp pencil and don't push very hard. And that definitely takes some practice. So I've heard people say, well, I always draw, I have a heavy hand. Okay, well, I think everyone has a heavy hand when they start. You just want to start teaching yourself to pay attention to keeping a very light hand. Don't push very hard with that pencil. Now, I have told students that and seen where they didn't push hard enough. So you've got to find the balance of what's going to work best for your technique. Now you can see I'm really building up the look of the feathers. Now he looks nice and fluffy on his body. You're starting to really see the difference between one grouping of feathers and another. And I come back through part with highlights, part with shadows. And I'm going to do even more on this. Once I get the water in, I am going to be able to better balance or judge. Do I need areas to be brighter or darker? It's kind of hard when everything is up against the black of the paper. So I can come back and make any adjustments I need later. So onto the water. This is another area, do not need it to be exact, and I actually don't want it to be exact. There are things that I'm going to change just to see what happens. Now, if you look right now, there's a dark spot in kind of the middle of the black right under the bird. I wanted to test and find out, this was done on the live stream, so you can watch this part in real time, but I wanted to test and find out if the odorless mineral spirits would affect the color of the paper, or when it dried, did it go back to looking completely normal? And it seems like some paper, when you get a lot of OMS on it, you won't notice a difference. Once it's dry, you can't see where the OMS touched, and some you can. And this one you definitely can. So you want to watch as you're working. Don't go crazy with the OMS and make brush strokes on area where you want the paper to stay black. Only put it on areas where the colored pencil is. If you go outside of that line, you end up with almost an oily spot or a darker black spot, which doesn't look good. So it is something that you want to watch when you're leaving the black of the paper showing through. I've not experienced that much with white paper, but then again, I'm always pretty careful with the OMS. I don't typically use that much on my brush. I fill the brush or get it wet with the OMS and then dry it off on a paper towel. I use a Viva paper towel for that, or an old t-shirt. Regular like Bounty doesn't work well. It doesn't really play well with odorless mineral spirits. One drop of that stuff and it goes it just kind of takes over the whole paper. But do be careful when you make those brush strokes. Don't go crazy with them and get them all over areas where you wanted the black of the paper to stay. Or let's say you're working on a blue paper, same thing. I wouldn't want to get the OMS all over that. I've also experienced that with the buff colored, what is that? Oh my, it just slipped my head. The Stonehenge. That paper I found where if I went crazy with the OMS or went out like outside of the areas where I just wanted the paper to show, it will stain that kind of oily mark. Once the colored pencil is over it, you won't notice it. So it's not a problem. You just don't want to go crazy getting that pencil or that OMS all over. A very little amount goes a long way with that. Now I want to make sure that my lines, the streaky lines horizontally, stay very, very parallel to the upper and level edge of the paper. I don't want this drooping one side or the other. That gives it a weird kind of melting look, which I don't want. Now, one of the things I didn't really like on the reference photo, and I kind of started copying it that way, as you can see here, the head, the way that the water ripple there, it distorted it, and it just looked kind of, I don't know, it looked weird to me. I didn't like it. So I ended up coming back through and creating just straight horizontal lines right through the face and the eye there. I broke it up, and I liked that look much better. This one has kind of a melted face look, which at this stage, I just really didn't like, and that's how my reference photo was, but I wasn't super in love with how that ended up looking when I copied as the reference was. Once I broke that up, I liked it much, much better. So right here, you can see under the pelican how dull those colors look. I'm just going to layer and layer and layer until I brighten up the areas that I want to be very bright. Now, I don't worry about colors being exact. That really isn't a big deal to me. What I'm watching as I work is making sure that my contrast and my values are correct. Are my darks dark enough? My lights light enough? If you're trying to create very realistic work, that is what's going to make all the difference in the world. An accurate drawing, make sure your base foundation is very accurate, and get those values correct. Darks dark enough, lights light enough. If everything's just kind of mid-tone, which feels safe, it ends up looking like a cartoon. It doesn't have those really dark darks, those really light lights. So it doesn't even matter if I'm using the same oranges that I used on the beak. I am pretty sure I'm not. I'm just grabbing pencils here. As long as my contrast, my values are what they should be. That's what I'm looking for. I'm asked on most videos, people wanting to know the exact colors I used. It doesn't matter. That information isn't going to help you to make more realistic work. If you see orange, grab an orange. If you see red on your reference, grab a red. If it doesn't look good, grab a different red. It is that simple. And everyone wants to turn it into this super like scientific, I need all of the information. I need everything in order for my work to look. No, you don't. If you really want to progress and you really want your work to improve, first, you've got to start figuring out how to pick colors. And the only way you're going to do that is to jump into the deep end and start choosing the colors for yourself. If you keep following books or things like that, lessons that are giving you every single color every single time, that's fine for your first one or two pieces. But after that, if you honestly can't look at a piece and think, I'm drawing a tree, I know I need a yellowish green, grab a green. I don't like this one, try a different one. If you get to the point where you can't do that, something's going wrong. You need to do that. And the only way you're going to is just to start experimenting. Grab a pencil. If you don't like it, grab a different one. That is how you're going to learn to mix colors. That is how you're going to learn to make your own artwork look the way that you want it to. If you're using those training wheels of now pick up green number whatever, you're not going to progress. Not only that, not everyone even has the same pencils. You may be using Prismacolor, in which case the pencils names I'm using in Polychromos aren't going to affect you anyway. So don't get too hung up on the concept of I just need to know what color to use. That is not going to make a difference in your work. Look how much I'm layering. It doesn't matter anyway because I'm layering color on top of color. I'm mixing color. Focus on getting your darks dark enough and your lights light enough, and everything else will fall into place. I've taken this white pencil, actually, I think that one was one of the lighter grays, and I've added some shiny kind of ripples over the feathers. And that was something my reference photo did not have, but it made my water look a little bit shinier, more glossy, and helped the pelican's head not to look like it's melting. See right there, you can see the eye. I didn't like how that looked, so I'm going to break that up now, and I can come back through with my black pencils too, so it looks like the black of the paper cutting in. But it gives it a nice, shiny, sparkly almost feel. Glassy, that's the word I'm looking for. If I talk enough, sooner or later I'm bound to hit the right word. And at this stage, I really want to keep backing away, back away from the painting and see what it looks like. What would balance it out better? What does my piece need? Or you can take a photo with your cell phone. When you look at it on a small screen, it really shows you a lot. And one of the bonuses of taking a photo with your cell phone is if you use a any photo editor that allows you to adjust your color saturation, your contrast, all of those things. Mess with it in the the photo editor and see if it looks better if you make those adjustments. If you make those adjustments in the photograph and realize, wow, I wish mine looked like that. That lets you know, go back to hit the easel again and make yours look like that. It's a really good way to get an idea of how to improve your own work. Just edit your photo, take a photo, quick, and you don't have to, use Photoshop or any great photo editor, just any photo editing app. Adjust different values and see if it makes yours look better. Now here I'm using Touch Up Texture and Titanium White from brushandpencil.com. This is that mixture that I mix them together. I'll have a card pop up so you can see how to do that exactly. But I'm able to paint on. This is a product that's made specifically for colored pencil. Gel pens, all of those are not going to be archival on top of colored pencil. They're fine if you're doing things in sketchbooks, but if you're selling your work or you want your work to last long term, don't use gel pens, acrylic paint, anything like that. They're not archival. They're not meant to go on top of colored pencil where this product is. The great thing about this product too is it's intended to add tooth back to the paper or texture back to the paper. So when this dries, let's say I had an area where I wanted the beak to be super orange or I messed up and I needed to change the color, I can put this product on there, let it dry, and then put whatever color I want on top of it. It has a little bit of texture so the pencil has something to grip to. And then I'm able to get this much brighter than any colored pencil. I mean, even my Derwent Drawing Chinese White, which is probably one of the most opaque colored pencils, isn't going to be as opaque as this. So it's really nice. Plus, I'm getting really fine detail. I'm using a synthetic hog-haired liner brush. This one is a number 2, I believe. You want to let that dry completely before you put color on top of it. One of the things that'll happen, it'll be dry to the touch, and you'll go to put a color with colored pencil on it, and it's not really dry or cured all the way, and it'll flake up a bit. So make sure it dries all the way. You also don't want to use that product on something if you're going to roll the painting to ship it. You would not want, like the original, you would not want to use that product. It is non-flexible. You want to use it on something that is always going to stay flat to prevent any cracking or chipping with that, which is great on this. This conservation board is really thick. You can't bend it anyway, so it's a perfect combination. But there is my finished piece. If you have used black paper, blue paper, any color besides white, let me know what your experience was. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What did you think? Have you subscribed yet? If not, I have a handy button right there. It's round, has an orange arrow going towards it. If you click on that, that'll help you to keep up to date with all of my videos every single week. Why do I keep saying that? YouTube just doesn't notify people anymore. You may also want to click on the bell for the notification. And if that's not working, sign up for my email newsletter. It is free. I send out one newsletter once a week, and that will include whatever videos went live streams, and some art motivation and tips that I don't post anywhere else.